Good morning. How are you? So nice. Hi, Barbara. And John. So great to see you here. My name is Emeril Lagasse. I'm the co-founder and executive director of the Woodstock Film Festival, now in its 18th year and hopefully going strong. So, this particular venue, I love the Klein Art, and we've been having our panels here for the past, I don't know how many years, good number of years, and it's just, I think the size is just right. I mean, it's intimate. You can really engage in a conversation with the panelists, and we have some great panelists for you this morning and throughout the day and tomorrow. So I hope that you'll come back and hear their stories and get to know them, because we've really assembled some pretty amazing people from the full gamut of the film industry. So I hope to see you here again. I want to thank our sponsors. The Woodstock Film Festival is a 501c3 organization, and therefore it is funded by individual contributions and companies and foundations and ticket buyers. I'd like to thank Marketech, our founding sponsor, as well as BMI, which is also a founding sponsor, and some of the local sponsors, such as Miller Howard and WDST, Radio Woodstock. We have Kettle One Vodka, which has been with us for the past few years. We have Heineken, which has been with us. So we're drinking well, you know that. And you guys, when you come to the parties, will be drinking well. We have Gigantic Pictures, which is a post-production house in the city. We have Gray Krause, which is a law firm, and they have been with us for many years. 120dB Films, which is also a film financing company. So those people, the individuals, everyone who supports us, thank you all so very much. We couldn't be here without you. Yes, thank you, and thank you. So it is now my pleasure to introduce two really great people. The person you have come here to see, Shep Gordon, a true Supermensch. If you were there last night and saw the film about Shep, you know why it's titled Supermensch. He's not only an incredible music manager, a film producer, and a true trendsetter who really started the whole chef culture, celebrity chef culture. He's also just this really great guy who's been an incredible support to countless individuals near and far. So I'll invite Shep Gordon, and Shep, if you can come out here, and as well as his longtime friend, where are you? Ed Gerard is Shep's longtime friend. He has worked under Shep as a music supervisor. And he's really an Emmy Award music supervisor and music manager who's worked under Shep for over 10 years. And really, he's the reason why Shep is here. So thank you both for being here. And you guys are in for a treat. So Ed, take it away.
Oh, great. Thank you. Good morning, everybody.
Thank you all for coming.
All right. Thanks for coming. So I'm going to ask first, did anybody see the movie last night, Supermensch? All right, good. Okay, good. Well, that covers a lot. Can we leave now?
So if you saw the movie, if you remember, there was a young baby born in the hospital in the movie that I went to visit. Carter, stand up. And that's her mom, Kira, behind her, who is now not Kira anymore. She's now Carter's mother.
Well, so again, if you saw the movie, Shep Gordon, just give you a little brief background. As a young kid growing up in Saugerties, New York, by the way, I desperately wanted to be in the music business and ventured out to California and was very fortunate enough to meet Shep, and Shep was gracious to allow me to start working under him, teach me, guide me. Not only myself, but my brother, my younger brother, Peter, who might be in the audience, We both got our start in the music business and have made careers out of it, and it's only because of Shep Gordon. So just want to thank you for that.
Sometimes you make a mistake. No problem.
So Shep's life is an incredible journey. You know, it's like a fictional novel, but it's actually true. Starting out in the late 60s, graduating from college, moving out to Los Angeles, stumbling into the music business, maybe. I guess Shep would probably be better at telling the story of how he sort of came out to Los Angeles, not with a desire to work in the industry, I don't believe.
No,
but somehow the industry found him, and maybe you can just touch briefly about how that sort of
Sure.
came about.
I went out, I was at the New School for Social Research, taking a master's in sociology and going to night school. And during the day I was working for a company, my cousin's company called Divine Garments. Can you hear me? Can everybody hear me all right? Divine Garments made clothes for funerals. So they didn't have backs. So the dresses didn't have backs and the suits didn't have backs. My job was to work in the sales room. So as I'm sure you could, if you vision yourself, that it wasn't a happy person who ever walked in the sales room. They had someone they loved that just died, and they had to pick out clothes for him. And then the second part of my job was deliveries to funeral homes where the clothes didn't fit and the funeral had already was getting ready to go. So all I saw were crying people. And this wasn't going to be my life. So a recruiter came from the California Probation Department, and this was during the Reagan era. And I was a complete hippie, cover Carter's ears. I was a pharmaceuticals, I dabbled in pharmaceuticals. I always thought of myself, you know, I think for a lot of Jewish middle-class kids, there's this thought of of being on a white horse saving the world. I think that was a big part of the hippie movement. Certainly from my point of view, it was this altruistic thing that we could save the world. And we had had some success with burning ROTC buildings and burning draft cards and the war effort. So I decided I was going to take this job as a probation officer, get on my white horse, gallop out to California and save these kids from Ronald Reagan. And I got there the first day, and it was basically Latino, called Los Patrinos Juvenile Hall. Still exists, about an hour outside of LA. And I was a long hair. Luckily, I had left my pharmaceuticals in the car because I didn't realize they search you when you come in, or I would have been on the other side of the cells. And they sent me out to play softball with the kids, and I'm talking to the kids, telling them everything's cool now. I'm here. You're going to get in your main treatment. We're going to do some stuff. And very shortly, I became the baseball, and there were no guards around. All the guards had left. But they didn't really hurt me. They could have, but they didn't. I think they were probably more compassionate than the guards. But they were obviously told to make my life tough, and I got it. So I left that night. I quit the first day. And I drove into LA. I'd never been to LA. I always wanted to go to LA. I didn't have much money. So I found a motel that had a vacancy sign. It was, I think, $22 a night. And I had enough money to stay for maybe 20 days. And got to the motel about 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. It was a Hotel California around the pool, two-story hotel around the pool. It was like a quarter moon night. I remember it really well. I went out on the patio. I ingested some psychedelics. And I heard a girl screaming. And I had just come from a jail. So my thought was, somebody's getting raped, somebody's getting hurt. Get my white horse out. Now I'm galloping down to the pool on the white horse to save this girl. And I separate the two people, and the girl punches me. They were making love. Slight error. So now I've been beat up twice, my first day in LA, but not a good start. In the morning, I go down to the pool, and the girl was Janis Joplin. I didn't know the night before. and she was sitting with Jimi Hendrix and the Chambers Brothers, and Creedence Clearwater was floating around, and Jim Morrison. And my first thought was, oh my God, for my pharmaceutical business, I have just hit the payload. I am going to stay very close to these people. And that was sort of what I did. And then about 2 months into it, 3 months into it, Jimi Hendrix said to me, what do you do for a living? You know, and I said, well, this is what I do with you is what I do for a living. And he said something really poignant, which I never really thought of. He said, where I come from in Watts, if I have a new watch, I better have a story of how I afforded the new watch, because the cop is going to ask me at some point, what are you going to tell him how you pay the rent? And I said, you know, I'm a white, Jewish, middle-class guy who's never had to deal with that that wasn't my relationship with the world at all. But I understood what he said, and he said, Jimi Hendrix said, are you Jewish? And I said, yeah, you should be a manager. And Lester Chambers was sitting there, and he said to Lester, there's that group of freaks from Phoenix still living in your basement. And he said, yeah, go tell them we found a Jew for him. And it was Alice Cooper, who I've managed 50 years. So that's a long-winded answer to a short question, but...
So you late 60s, I guess, early 70s.
68, maybe.
68.
Yeah.
Okay. So you started managing Alice Cooper, who and his band, which are these young kids that were
at that point. Alice Cooper was 5 people.
Was 5 people. Yeah. But so, how did you literally get your start in terms of taking what you saw? Okay, in Alice, which no experience in the music business yourself at that particular point. You saw this bunch of young kids. How did you get them started? I mean, what was the first inertia point that sort of them going?
It was sometimes luck is as important as anything. So when I started with Alice, I was very open and honest with them. Alice says we sort of met on a live. I told him I was a manager. He told me he was a singer. And they were, the only thing they had is that everybody hated them. Mm-hmm. Which for me was the perfect act, because I didn't want to manage them. I wanted to be able to say I managed them. Right. So if they were at all successful, that got in the way of my business. So it was perfect. Nobody wanted them. We didn't work. It was running along perfectly until everybody in my life got arrested. And I didn't want to be that guy. So I looked at my world and I said, okay, how am I going to pay the rent? I can't do this anymore. And the only thing in my life was Alice, who I really liked. All the 5 guys, we had developed a really special kind of relationship. And I sat him down and I said, listen, you signed with me because I'm Jewish. I'm going to get rich. If we want to all get rich together, I'm in till we're all millionaires. We all shake right now. We'll figure it out. If not, let's just go figure out what we can do with our lives. So we all shook hands that day that we were going to stay together till we were millionaires. We never signed the contract. And the first thing we sat down and said, okay, what's our strength? And our strength was that everybody hated us. That's what everybody had in common. We do a show, everybody would walk out. The first album, Lester Bang's a great critic in Rolling Stone. His review was, Alice Cooper, something Walt Disney had the good sense to leave in the can. So we were getting what I wanted, which was horrible stuff. But so that was the only thing we had. So, okay, how do we turn that into the #1 group in the world? How do you turn everybody hating you? And when we looked at the horizon and we looked backwards, because I always believed in history and I was a sociologist by training, so patterns were really important. The thing we realized really fast is that the only thing that superstars really had in common at that point was parents hated them. What did Elvis Presley have in common with the Beatles? Nothing, except that parents hated them both. You couldn't see it. The thing that really pushed Elvis Presley over the top was when he did the Ed Sullivan Show, and they wouldn't show his hips. That was the manager insisting the only way I'll put him on the show is if you say we will not show his hips. And if you guys remember, that was there wasn't a mother or father in the world who wanted their kid to watch Ed Sullivan because he was so disgusting. His hips, he was sexual. The Rolling Stones had long hair. They peed on gas stations. Every parent hated that. So we said, well, we don't know how to make music, but we know how to get parents to hate us. And that, if you look at the career of Alice Cooper, that's really what we did. Stories about biting chickens' heads off, and anything we could do. I mean, just the name Alice Cooper on a man in 1968 was enough to drive, any parent who, my date's coming over, Alice Cooper, and you open the door and it's a guy, that door is going to get shut in your face. Yeah. So everything we did went for that. That was the greatest thing we could do is get banned. Like when they would ban us in a city, it would, yes! Because that led to teenage angst. And
so you kind of stumbled upon the key to success.
We stumbled on it. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say stumbled on it. Once we looked in that direction, it became every other group in the world was trying to make the best records in the world. That wasn't we knew we could buy that, and we ended up buying Bob Ezrin, who came in, and Alice developed into in my opinion, a great songwriter, a great lead singer, a great entertainer. But that was developed.
Well, that was the amazing thing, because Alice, as a kid growing up and seeing, it also kind of morphed into not only a band playing songs, but a visual act as well. And if you went and ever saw Alice Cooper in concert, it was the most extraordinary thing. And there was all these props and things happening on there, and it was just, you'd sit back.
But most of them to the point, like he would chop up baby dolls on stage. And we'd call up every organization that was for protecting babies, and we'd give them free tickets to come down. We used a snake on stage. We invited the ASPCA every night to come pick at us. That was the goal. Right. The goal was, get the parent at the breakfast table to say, if you bring home an Alice Cooper album, you're grounded, knowing that would force them to go bring home an Alice Cooper album.
Did you guys sit around just talking about what things to do to upset people and choose the best one?
That was the goal.
That was the goal.
That was our focus on just about everything.
It was also the age, and I remember this is when you received albums, you would sometimes there'd be like this little, not only the music and a disc in it, but there'd be like these little gifts in it. And I do remember Shep and Alice being some of the first people to include panties inside the anything a teen would be interested in and working.
The panties was a great one. The panties story is a fantastic story. So we I'm going to change my language a little bit, Carter, but we didn't give about anything. The only thing we cared about was winning. So it came time to do a record, School's Out. And I always wanted an element of rebellion in everything we did. And School's Out was a perfect vehicle because the song was very rebellious. And a company called Pacific Pioneer came up with this idea of a school desk, which was brilliant, I thought. And then we started talking about what would go in this, like what would be in a rebellious teenager school desk. And one guy said bubble gum, a switchblade, or this or that. And I had read a story. Most of my ideas came from a twist on the news. I was a big history student, and I always tried not to reinvent the wheel, but to use something that worked. And I had clipped this story out maybe 8 months before about at the Baltimore Harbor, they confiscated paper panties that were flammable. Only inflammable paper panties were allowed to be imported into America. And I thought, this is hysterical. It's a way for me to get like a crotch moment in somewhere in Alice's career without being completely obscene. And I just stuck it away. And when the school desk came up, oh my God, if I could put the paper panties on the album and get busted for bringing in flammable panties, I now have Alice Cooper and panties tied together in the news and getting busted. It's like a I got everything. So the story is a little bit long, but it gets a little convoluted. But the record company wouldn't In those days, there were only two companies that made album covers. And each record company worked exclusively with one company or the other. They didn't allow open bidding. And I brought it in, and the bid came back too expensive, and they wouldn't pay for the panties and on the thing. So I went to the other company behind their back and got a quote, told them the story. They wanted Warner Brothers business. So they matched the price that Warner said they were willing to pay. And I went back, and they turned me down. They wouldn't let me use it. So I hired a couple of detectives, because we had a few dollars by that point, and we found out that the house that the guy who made the decision at Warner Brothers lived in was owned by the album company. And I brought him in a copy of his of the ownership, the deed. We got the panties on really fast. It was amazing how the price came down. Oh, we made it. Oh, it was an error. No, it's exactly the right price. So anyway, so these were not people I could trust. So I couldn't bring them in on it. So the panties that we got were real panties. They were not flammable, inflammable panties. They came from Canada. But I ordered personally, I think it was 20,000 or 30,000 pair of panties. They were a fraction of a penny each, to come into the same harbor that the bust had happened. And I called up Tom Zito, who was the lead music writer at the time. He worked at the Baltimore Sun. And I trusted him, and I knew him, and I said, can I bring you in on this? It's going to happen. Someone's going to write the story. If you'll get me a front page, I'll give you the exclusive. So I gave him the exclusive, and the day the album came out, the front page of the Baltimore Sun was largest panty raid in history. And my phone lit up from Warner Brothers saying, we just shipped 1 million albums with those panties, so we're going to have to withdraw every album. And I told them that
Well, one of my favorite stories, and it was in the movie too, is how Alice was trying to break overseas, and you booked a show over there in London, and the show probably wasn't doing as well as we would have liked to. And that first rule of thumb that Shep always taught me is you better make sure there's people in seats, even if you have to give them away. So the idea was the show wasn't really doing as well, and you're trying to break Alice, and then you came up with this idea of having the billboard, which was basically a nude Alice with the snake wrapped around his genitals, and have it break down in the middle of Piccadilly Square, where all the traffic from every part of London kind of comes in at 5 o'clock at night.
break down twice.
I told the guy to get rid of the keys or whatever the deal was. And it was also one of the first couple of years of Airborne, if I'm not, I could be wrong about this, but the Airborne, and so the helicopters were up there doing news, and they picked up on the story, and all of a sudden you have this huge traffic jam based on this huge Alice Cooper billboard stuck in the middle of Piccadilly Square, and needless to say, the show sold out.
And they introduced in Parliament the next day a bill to ban Alice, and the show sold out that afternoon.
It was all. Yeah. It was those great things.
That was really funny. That came out of this exactly that thought. It was Alice's first trip to England. I thought that I was a novice. I thought everyone would know who he was because we were gigantic in America, and we came in. Nobody really cared. And there was a brilliant man there. One of my heroes, Derek Taylor, who was known as the Fifth Beatle. He was their publicist. Brilliant guy. And I was panicked. And the record company president said, "Go see Derek." And I walked into Derek's office. He had this fantastic round office without a desk, big office. And he always had a cigarette that he dangled. And George Harrison was there, all in these white robes. He had just come back from India. And Harry Nielsen. And great manager, Roy Silver. So I had to wait for hours till this was over, and when everybody left, Eric sort of turned to me and said, "But what can I help you with?" And I said, "Well, your chairman sent me down. I have this group, Alice Cooper, and they're coming in, and we haven't sold any tickets." And he asked how he could help, and I said, "What I need to do is, sometime in the next 10 days, get every family in England to tell their children they can't go see Alice Cooper." And he sort of looked at me a little weird, but he got it immediately, and we started talking, and I started questioning him. I said, "Is there anything like the Ed Sullivan Show?" Because in America at that point, the Ed Sullivan Show, everybody would get around the TV. or Amos and Andy, or Sergeant Bilko. Things. Was there anything that? And he explained to me that morning TV in London was gigantic because of traffic, and people would watch it for traffic, weather, and things like soy reports. But that every family watched it. That was the biggest by far of anything they had. And when he said traffic, I said, "Oh my God, traffic! That's too easy." So I showed him this picture we had just done by Richard Avedon, of Alice naked with a boa constrictor wrapped around them. And I said, where's the biggest traffic tie-up we could possibly get? And he said, Piccadilly, rush hour in the morning. And he found me a truck driver who was willing to go to jail for a tidy sum. And but the part that it was such a different time. So we did this huge truck. We broke it down at Piccadilly twice. It backed up traffic 48 miles. It was like a nightmare. But on the truck, it was those kind of days, I had 4 girls in hot pants giving out flyers. It was so cheesy. But it sold out. And that became, and still is, our best market because they tried to ban them. So every time we would come back, they would try and ban them. And we would, send flowers to the MP and like notes, just to try and get it, So still today our biggest market. But we would do stuff like every time it would calm down and they'd forget how obnoxious we were, we would do a thing like we'd fly to, Alice used a big cyclops in the show, a 10-foot cyclops monster. And in those days you could come through customs any way you wanted to come through. So we would fly over. Alice would walk through holding the hand of the cyclops monster. The Fleet Street, because they had paparazzi there way before us. The Fleet Street photographers would shoot it. We'd get back on the plane and go home. Just for that one shot to remind them that we were despicable.
So in the mid-'70s, Alice being such a visual artist on stage and all, I remember starting to see long-form videos of the concerts. Mm-hmm. And it was, as a young kid, it was sort of my first introduction to seeing these in that form, on video, on TV, so to speak. Could you touch upon, look a little bit, because I know that you eventually started producing movies and started a company. Was there any influence early on in how you sort of sold and marketed Alice visually, mm-hmm. that sort of eventually led into your other career of
Yeah, I mean, with Alice, we were sort of ahead of the curve because we did these short videos before there was any place to play them. Mm-hmm. But later on, with all my artists, whenever a new technology would come out, Alice taught me, and through it I learned that it's really hard as an artist to get a gigantic audience, to really be a superstar, just based on your art. It's normally some cultural wave. It's some wave that's out there that you become the face of. So part of that for me was always having my artists be the face of new technology. Mm-hmm. So with Blondie, we did the first video album before there were any video players. Mm-hmm. But we knew that it was coming. Laserdisc was coming. So that was always my thing, was to just try and stay ahead. I did... when HBO came on there and you could see pay-per-view was going to be present, I did their first special with Raquel Welch. Mm-hmm. I think you were there when we did the first MTV specials.
Correct.
We did the first 7 or 8 MTV long-form specials. They had never done a long-form. But it was really just to get my artists to be the face of the technology, because at the beginning of a technology, there's no real economic upside. You didn't get anything for MTV. HBO paid expenses. There were no real fees. It's later on in the life of a technology that it becomes rewarding.
Well, so we moved through the 70s, and Shep starts to manage other artists, Blondie and Anne Murray, are all things that are in the movie. But also, I want to touch a little bit about, your sort of involvement in the R&B business, because a lot of people don't really recognize Shep for doing it. People in the industry do, of course, but Shep started working with great R&B artists like Teddy Pendergrass, Luther Vandross, Lisa Fisher,
Rick
Callaway
James.
Yeah, what was it?
Rick James.
Rick James. So I want to, because the Teddy Pendergrass is also dear to my heart because I got a chance to work with Teddy for a number of years under Shep as well. But here was this great, amazing R&B singer, one of the best of all times. And Shep recognized that after he came out of the group Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes and started working with Teddy and was literally making him one of the biggest stars in the world, I remember and thought at the time. And then, unfortunately, Teddy gets in his accident, which changed his life and his career. But what was amazing about that is if you could touch upon that a little bit, the idea of like, as a manager, when you face those type of situations where you actually have a business going and it's about fun and making money and everything else, and then all of a sudden you're faced with having to deal with a personal an issue as big as that was. How do you get through that and still run a business and do other things as well? Maybe you could just touch upon
it's hard. Interesting you bring it up. I did for years I've wanted someone to tell the real Teddy story, and BBC Films is finally doing it. And I did a 2-hour interview yesterday, and they asked me about that moment of telling them, and I just broke down. I couldn't stop crying. So it's still there. It never goes away. And I think it's sort of the moment I lost any little bit of joy from sort of what I was doing. I was so aware of the fact that fame kills, and here was someone who got really close, and I helped get him there. I sort of lost my zest. But those are the times when if you're going to do your job, you got to forget all of it and immerse yourself in doing what you have to do. So in Teddy's case, it went from working 2 hours a week to working 50 hours a week on him, because we had to get his estate in line. I had to figure out ways to get revenue. There were medical things to manage, which is a 24/7 issue at that point. None of us thought he would live. So it became a much more time-consuming, more emotional job. But I don't think anybody ever, anyone here has had someone they love pass away, especially young, and those other things you get over. You just figure out a way to keep going and not go back to it too often.
Well, Teddy was, even in his handicap, always appreciated and loved Shep, because Shep really looked after him up until he literally passed away. Yeah. So it just our business is a little fleeting. It can go like that in a heartbeat. So
and his mom's still alive.
His mom is still, that's right.
They're interviewing her today, 90.
She's 98 or something, isn't
yeah,
it?
Something.
Yeah,
like
wow.
Beautiful lady, Ida. Really sweet lady.
Yeah. So we then sort of go into the 80s, and that's when I started showing up in Los Angeles, and I kind of came out there, and at that particular time, Shep was starting a film company. He started it with another gentleman in the record business, Chris Blackwell. They initially started as a film company called Island Alive.
Right. I don't think you were there. We started
with Choose Me, actually. We go back.
No, we started as Alive. The first film we did was The Duelist, with Ridley Scott's first movie. Oh. Really for Carolyn to join the company.
Right.
And then we did a great little documentary, Return Engagement, which was actually the genesis of it was very close to here. It was back in the 50s. Timothy Leary moved to Dutchess County, I believe it was, to do his experimentations with LSD. And he got a tip one night that at 3 a.m, the police were coming to bust him. So they got all the drugs out of the house, and they put peat moss in these little bags. 3 o'clock in the morning, G. Gordon Liddy crawls into his bedroom window and arrests him. So we said, wouldn't it be amazing to put these two together on a lecture tour, the two real icons of the time, at polar opposites, and interview them. So we took them to, I think, 15 college campuses and made a movie out of it with Alan Rudolph. A fascinating movie. I don't even know if it's available, but if you can find it, it's really something. It's a real, it's not that time. So at that point, Chris Blackwell came in and had always wanted to be in the film business. And I was right in the middle, and I never wanted to meet him. He had been to the office maybe 10 times to see Carolyn, and she buzzed me. I said, this is a guy his reputation was so bad that I just didn't want to meet him. There was no upside to meeting him. There was nobody I knew who had anything good to say about him, which was rare in my life.
That's true.
I'm sorry, Chris. But I had, when Teddy's accident happened, it's way too long a story to tell, but when Teddy's accident happened, because he needed money and because everybody in his life were just horrible humans, the only way I could get him money, this is after a series, I won't go into it, but really, really ugly record stuff that you hear about ugly entertainment business. This was ugly. Someone promised $1 million if Teddy would, someone we had done business with, if Teddy would send a letter saying that that he wasn't going to record for them anymore. It's a long story, but we didn't think Teddy would live. All he could do was blink. They were his best friends. I got him to sign the paper. His mother and I went into the hospital. He signed the paper. I went back to the guy who had promised me the $1 million, who I'd been doing business with for 30 years, who just looked me in the eye and said, you think I'd give a Schwarzer $1 million? You're out of your mind. And I wasn't going back to Teddy's hospital room to tell him that. And I had to bring $1 million. So Chris Blackwell. So I called him up and I said, listen, I've never met you because no one's ever said a good word about you. I know you're going to screw me, but I need I think it was $1.5 million to make a movie that you can't have the soundtrack to. And he was in the record business. But what I will promise you is that I will build a successful film company and you'll be my partner. That's how Choose Me happened. And the song,
We'll touch on Choose Me because the origin of Choose Me was based on getting Teddy.
well, it was a scam. Teddy had when I worked with Alice, I had troubles with Warner's. We had a clause in our contract said we could do a soundtrack album outside of Warner Brothers. So we did a TV show called Welcome to My Nightmare, which I funded, and we sold it to their sister company, Atlantic, knowing they couldn't sue their sister company, but it got us off the label. So every contract I did always had a soundtrack clause, and an artist could leave the company. Teddy had a soundtrack clause. A friend of mine, Bob Krasnow, had just taken over Elektra Records. And I went to him and told him the story about the guy who said he wouldn't give me the $1 million, who promised that I can't go back into Teddy's. And he said, is Teddy going to live? And I said, I don't think so. And he said, well, what do you want me to do? I said, I want you to give me $1 million for a soundtrack album. And he said, Shep, I just started working here. I can't do that. I said, you got it, Bob. He said, can you get me a tape of Teddy singing? I said, he can't talk. Can you get me anything that someone would think it's Teddy? And can you get me a script? Let me put it in my file. If Teddy dies, I have in my file at least evidence of why I gave him the money. So I went to Luther, and I asked Luther to make himself sound like Teddy. And he wrote a song called Choose Me. And then I went to Alan Rudolph, and I said, can you write a script off this song, but we're never going to make the movie? And he said, okay. And brought it to Krasnow. He gave me the $1 million. And then Alan Rudolph called me right before I got the money saying, Shep, you asked me for a favor. Now I want to make the movie. So I said, I can't make the movie. I don't have money. He said, I want to make the movie. So that's when I called Blackwell. And I said, okay, you give me the money for the movie. I get my money for the soundtrack. You can't have the soundtrack, even though you're a record company. And luckily it all worked. Teddy lived. Choose Me was a beautiful movie.
Absolutely.
I got
started Luther's career
and
too. Yeah.
Hooking Into You.
Yep.
I paid Krasnow back by getting him the Gypsy Kings.
That's right.
And he made a fortune. And life is beautiful.
Yeah. So around that time, you started also with the company distributing films, and one of the first films that I remember distributed was Kiss of the Spider Woman, which I don't know if anybody ever saw. But Shep had a lot to do that with the company, putting it out.
Koyaanisqatsi was our first.
Koyaanisqatsi, excuse me, which is another amazing movie, by the way.
Talking Heads was second.
Yeah.
Koyaanisqatsi first. But Kiss came in there. Kiss was in.
And that won an Academy Award for William Hurt, and
I had an amazing, just as an offside, I had one of those moments in life on Kiss of the Spider Woman that was unbelievably humbling, but amazing. I found, as with many Jewish families during the 40s, families split up from Europe and didn't even know where some of them went. And I knew I had family in Brazil, but all I had was a name, a family name. And about 15 years ago, I found my family in Brazil, a big family, 50 people. One of the guys was the minister of culture at the time. Sadly, they saw down the trees. They're the big paper company, but I forgive them because they're blood. Sort of, kind of. But anyway, so I meet him. I go in his office, and there's a Kiss of the Spider Woman poster behind his desk with my name on it. And very arrogantly, like the real ugly American, I say to him, Max, how did you know I made the movie? You didn't even know I existed. And what are you talking about? And I said, the poster, Kiss of the Spider Woman. He said, oh, I financed it. I sold it to an American company. He sold it to me. So sometimes fate.
So around that time, I guess the association with Ireland sort of split, and then Live started doing their own films under Live again, putting out great movies.
No, and as predicted, right. I don't tell bad stories, and it didn't affect my life. But I think we don't have that many people at the beginning of their journey here, but history actually means something. I wish people had sort of remembered that election time. But history really means something. So the way our company ended, I had, by this point, become very friendly with Chris Blackwell, because everyone always told me, like Rolling Stone said, called him the babyface killer. Ahmet Ertegun said, I'll give anybody $1 million who can find the heartbeat. Those are pretty tough lines. Those are tough lines. Yeah. But they all said, he's fantastic, and he was. I loved him. We became great friends. He stayed at my house, and this was the beginning of the real independent film era. And there's a fellow who lectures at UCLA now, a producer, Jonathan Taplin, who went to work for Merrill Lynch, one of the big investment houses, decided they wanted to make an investment in the independent film business, and he came to buy our company. So Chris didn't have one penny in the company. He got his money back on Choose Me. He never put another penny in. We made 35 movies. He never saw our office. He never put a penny in. He never did anything. And we got this big offer for like $50 million and a big fund to sell the company. And I'm like so excited. He's staying with me. And I got to bring the guy from Schwab up, or whatever the company was, Jonathan. And he tells him the pitch story, and it means our company can grow. We get a lot of money. And Chris asked him to leave the room, and it was me and my partner, Carol. And he said, listen, Shep, you've heard about me, it's sort of, these are the moments I wait for. And what do you mean? He said, well, I know Carolyn has a mortgage on her house that's $400,000 due. So I'll give you $50,000 for your piece of the company, or I'm closing it tomorrow. And Carolyn, what do you want to do? Because it was voting. We each had equal votes. And he left the room. And I said to Carolyn, I love you. If you need it for the house, go. And she said, fuck him. And he closed the company the next day.
Wow, I remember that. Done. Well, you started...
So history means something.
Well, Carolyn Pfeiffer, a great
And
producer.
you were there, right?
I remember that.
Yeah. Everybody was like, what?
What happened?
What happened here?
It's over? But you guys went on to continue doing movies on your own, Carolyn, yourself as producers, making some great movies. The Moderns, I don't know, by Alan Rudolph, an amazing movie.
Whales of August.
Whales of
Probably
August, the last film with Betty Davis and Lillian Gish.
Both of their last films.
That was the last film.
Youngest person was 84, and Southern.
Yeah, remember that.
Was the youngest person.
I remember my brother Peter was working with the company at the time, having to go over to Betty Davis's house and deliver.
Oh my God! She was. I won't use the exact language, but I didn't go. But I called up Carol. They were in a little island off of Maine, and it was the first day of shooting. So I called her up. I said, "Go, Carolyn." She said, "Well, so here was the opening morning. Lillian Gish is in a beautiful rocking chair. She's covered in a handmade quilt. The sun is shining in on her. It's a gorgeous morning, happy as could be, rocking in the chair. Betty Davis walks in, storms in. She's been there for 48 hours. She's on her second assistant, smoking a cigarette. Lillian turns to me and says, 'Darling, is that Betty?' And I say, 'Yes.' She goes, 'Oh, hello, Betty.' And Betty turns around and says to her, 'Listen, bitch, we're here to work. Don't you be talking to me about anything.' So I, oh, so you had a really good day.
Those are some great movies. Also around that time, though, in my experience, Shep was the first person to kind of come up with this idea of genre-based films. And I say that respectfully in the sense that he had this great idea, maybe came from working with Alice and over the years, but he had to deal with two of the top horror directors in the business, John Carpenter and Wes Craven, and started doing low-budget horror films which is an interesting thing because you basically put yourself in the middle between a studio, Universal, who traditionally will interfere in almost everything you do as a filmmaker. And these directors were very stubborn, and they didn't care about making. I don't know if they all wanted to make money, but they cared about their films more than anything else.
Say goodbye to Carter.
Goodbye. See you guys.
Bye bye. Love you.
So
that was purely an economic model play. It was Chris had left us. We were out on a branch. I knew Carolyn made movies that lost money. That was her taste. So how was I going to keep this company in business with movies that lost money and no backer? And I didn't have the resources. I was never an accumulator. So in those days, home video was very significant to the sales of your movies. And the advance orders on home video were based on, it was like a checklist. Theatrical release, bingo, 30,000 units. Theatrical release, TV play, bing, 50. It was very calculated by the 5 or 6, the blockbusters and the people who bought them. It was a formula. So I decided I would do some research to see cost of production against home video sales if there was a genre that was really successful. And horror movies came up, that they were inexpensive but sold well in home video, particularly in home video. And what I had learned from being in the film business, even secondhand, was that there was a business of filmmakers who were completely frustrated, angry, not a happy bunch of people. And the cause of the anger, whether true or not true, was flurries of 25-year-old executives who had never made anything in their lives telling them how to make their movie. My first studio experience was a movie called Endangered Species. It was an Alan Rudolph movie. MGM financed it. I guess it was my second. It was after The Duelist. And there was a phenomenon happening in those days of mutilated cows being found in Colorado. And it was serious. It was a large amount of them, and nobody knew who the mutilation was. There were stories that it was the Russians. So Alan asked me for a little bit of money for investigative reporters, which we put out in the field, and they came back with these pictures. It was actually germ warfare testing by the U.S. government. They had silos, and they'd come out at night in helicopters and shoot the cows for testing. So we decided to make a movie on it, and nobody really wanted to touch it. But MGM had a guy named Robert. Forgive me, Robert. But he was starring in a very big television show for MGM, and they wanted to make him a leading man. So they agreed to finance it if we put him in as a lead. And he wasn't particularly right for it, but it was the only way we could get the movie made. And I get a call, they shut down the movie the third day. And I get Alan on the phone. Why'd they shut it down? He's like, he can't even talk to me. He said, well, we shot the scene we shot the night before was him in a wet field so his body's in water. He's got a tube breathing through the thing, and there's a helicopter flying over him, one of the helicopters, and he's investigating. We're telling the story of the helicopter, and as his head comes up, he looks around, then he goes back down, and he breathes so they don't see him. And they stopped the movie because his hair wasn't parted properly, and he's a leading man, and he's got to have a perfect part in his hair. And we stayed down for 2 days, and then we finally gave in and shot it. So here's a guy in a helicopter's over his head, in a lake. Everything's blowing except his hair. It's like perfect. I forgot the question, but.
Well, at the same time, you're producing. Well, there's a good thing is like, how did your experience as a music manager and sort of writing the book?
So what I was going to say about the horror movies.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
So what I knew is that they hated to talk to anybody. They didn't want to talk to anybody. So I went to. I looked up who were the most successful horror directors. It was John Carpenter and Wes Craven. They were both represented by ICM agency. They had the same agent. The head of the agency was a very good friend of mine. I'm godfather of his kids. And I said, how much money would I have to give Wes and John to give me a movie? I don't want to know the title of the movie. I don't want to see a script. I don't care where they're shooting. And I don't care if they don't spend any money. If they want to spend $1 on the movie, great with me. My only requirement is that they put their name over the title. Wes Craven's, John Carpenter's, knowing that they would never compromise their name. And so he gave me the number, and I went to Universal in America, and I went to Carolco, who was a big company overseas, and I said, I can deliver you 2 John Carpenters, 2 Wes Cravens at a very reduced price. I think I got $3 million, as I remember. Okay. And they got $2 million, I got $1 million. And they could spend $5 or all $2 million, whatever you want to do, guys. And we made 4 movies, and it was a good run. And it supported Carolyn's box office disappointments.
Well, good question. So when you're dealing with, as a music manager and managing careers with Alice and so forth, Teddy, how did that experience translate into the film world, working with directors? It's almost like you had to manage.
I never looked at it as a filmmaker. I looked at it as a manager of directors. Mm-hmm. My job was with an artist, build a fence. The difference with filmmakers that I found is that once you cross the line from making it to selling it, they were all antagonistic, which I didn't find in the music business. They enjoyed the help. Mm-hmm. We made Sam Shepard's only movies, and I'm a huge Sam Shepard fan. I mean, gigantic. Aloha, Sam. Like almost an idol of his plays. I just thought that he understood things in a way that most Americans didn't see him. So made this movie called Far North. Jessica Lange was in it, and some really good actors. And a very powerful PR lady, Pat Kingsley, represented Sam and represented me. And I asked her to set up a little screening, and we went to the screening, and it was just the worst reaction we had ever seen to anything. So we hired one of those research firms, and we got the lowest score any movie had ever gotten from their firm. And it was driving me crazy because it's Sam Shepard. And I know there's got to be a gem in there somewhere. So we didn't release it. We just held it. And it just was really bugging me. And then one morning it sort of hit me. The last frame of the movie was a birthday cake. And as we pulled back from the birthday cake, the 90-year-old matriarch of the family is blowing out the candles, and more and more family, old ones, young ones, all women. And I said, shit, that's what he's saying. We'll become a society of women raising women, which is what we really, to some extent, have become. The statistics are remarkable now, but he saw it, and he saw the problems it could sort of lead to of not having a father in the house. But as I always thought with him, his isn't conscious, it flows through him. If you ever see Sam in an interview or anything, it's completely different than his work. He's like a truck driver who happened to do those things. So I asked Pat to put more screenings together. I made up a new poster, which talked to that issue, and I gave a talk before the movie. The ratings were like through the roof. Best movie of, wow, this is really significant. I have it, my sister lives really related to him, and he wouldn't let me change the advertising or the poster. We ended up never releasing the movie. I think one theater for a day. But I never experienced that in the music industry, and I found that with Wes, exactly the same. John was exactly the same. Ridley Scott was his first movie, so he was more pliable. And the really older guys, the guy who did Whales of August, but the ones in the middle, they held on to this thing of pure art for art's sake, when they were right in the middle of making a movie about them is 99% economics and 1% art. So anyway.
So in the mid-'90s, we used to have office throughout the '80s and '90s. We moved around a couple times in Los Angeles with the office, but everyone always had a kitchen in it. Okay, and I was like, because come to find out that Shep likes his food, and he likes the whole experience of sitting around a table, conversing, drinking wine, and every other thing that comes along with that, eating. And we used to have
the old office on Melrose is now a cannabis store.
What is it?
Just
really?
Coincidentally, yeah. 8270 Melrose, that's the cannabis, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
You still have a piece of that?
History matters.
Well, we used to have, I remember we used to, Shep would come into town and we'd have like marketing meetings and stuff. What marketing meetings, we'd just sit around and Shep would sort of cook or, and have people come over and you'd have meetings there with the film people and the people in the music department and everything else. And it was such an amazing experience. And I'll just relate this little story. So Shep touched on base of that he picked up this band from France called the Gypsy Kings. Came back to us one day and he says, I just got back from Cannes and we're going to manage this band, the Gypsy Kings. And we're all sitting around, my brother was there at the time, and we're all sitting around the table eating, I think it was, and he goes, I don't know what we're going to do with them because they don't speak English, okay? There was no radio that was going to play them, okay? NPR was a thing of not even started yet. So we're all going what are we going to do here? And Shep says, well, we're going to bring them over to do a few shows at least to get them started in America, the New York, the Chicago, Los Angeles, and we're going to have to figure out how to sell them tickets. And we're sitting around there, and then we were playing the music in the background, and we were eating and drinking. This is my recollection of the story. Tell me if it's different. And all of a sudden, Shep, I believe, or somebody in the room, Shep said, somebody said, boy, this is pretty good music to eat to. And Shep goes, that's it. He goes, we got to get the name of every hot restaurant in these 5 cities, the 10 coolest, hippest restaurants in these 5 cities, and we're going to send in the music, and we're going to call them...
T-shirts for the waitresses.
T-shirts.
And the other thing we did is we sent every... I called John Paul Mitchell, and I said, listen, we're bringing this act in. I'll give you half the seats in Radio City, half the seats in Greek Theater to give out to your customers, and coffee cups, and records and T-shirts, but I want, every beautiful woman that comes into your beauty shop to have a Gypsy Kings ticket for free, knowing that if the beautiful women came, the men would follow.
Absolutely.
And it worked well.
Well,
Krasow thought I was crazy. After he signed them, Krasow, he said, wait a second. They don't. I remember.
Yeah,
They don't.
they don't
They're
speak
not in
English.
English. We're never going to get radio play.
Right.
No one knows. What did you do to me? It was like,
It was good. He created this phenomenon, which today every record company in the world uses this, marketing strategy, whether it's going to beauty salons or restaurants. And believe me, when we first started, they thought we were nuts.
Oh my God!
They wouldn't even help us. We
Yeah.
literally, and this is the day
I had
before.
to pay for the cups.
It was the day before computers and stuff, so we had to literally call the yellow pages and to find out the restaurants in these cities. And and the band, of course, I guarantee anybody that's been anywhere around the world, they hear the Gypsy Kings in restaurants. And my brother and I thank you because we still work with the Gypsy Kings, and they still sell out everywhere. So it's fantastic. So. Again, it's
And
thinking,
by the way, the first show in LA, they took everything from the hotel room.
yes,
Everything.
including the ashtrays.
Everything. No, they took everything. The sheets, the ashtrays, they took everything. I think my favorite, if I could tell another story, my favorite Gypsy King story is they were gypsies who didn't speak Spanish and lived in France, but was sold as a Spanish group. But they lived as gypsies. So a caravan and cooking on fires and under bridges so that the rain wouldn't hit them. And I knew them as that. But then we started to make some money. It started to get successful. I think one of them may have bought a house, but they still sort of lived their thing. But I never went back until a company called LA Gear came out with a Michael Jackson campaign for sneakers that was very successful. And they had the LA Gear girls, all dressed in white. Remember the LA Gear girls? Yeah. I said, they got to play the Latin market. We got the Gypsy Kings. So you got to follow up Michael Jackson with the Latin. So I convinced them. And they went for it. Remember, that was a huge deal. Yeah. I think it was like $1 million deal, which was, oh my God. And they came out to Santa Monica and shot the commercial, shot the poster. They were sitting on like a brick wall or something. All the girls were around them and stuff.
I remember that. Wow.
And I couldn't get it approved. I kept trying to get it approved and trying to get it approved. And finally, I just got on an airplane. I don't know if you came or Danny came or or maybe just me and Krasnow. Right. But I got on a plane and went to Al. And I got there. They're in the same place, except now Mercedes-Benz are pulling their caravan.
True story.
And I come in and I sit in the little thing and meet one of the wives who they never traveled. They never, and they said, don't talk here at all. Don't show anything. And they took me to a little bar around the corner. And I said, guys, it's $1 million. The post is great. This is going to be the greatest thing for your career. They said, we can't do it. Our wives will divorce us. And I said, no, it's a commercial. They said, no, you don't. No way to tell them that it's a commercial. They were gypsies, and they didn't do it. Remember that?
I do remember that.
That was painful. I had spent the money already.
So that leads to the next chapter of Shep's amazing career. In the mid '90s, Shep sort of said, the company's got a little too big. He had a beautiful house in Hawaii, which he was always generous and letting us use and everything else. And he says, yeah, I'm going to go to Hawaii for a while. And, he sort of downsized the company a little bit. But somehow when he was over there, he emerged as the manager to the chefs. And I'm like, what is that? So, and he made this because his love of food was so much. And, can touch on this a little bit, obviously, but he sort of told me, he says, well, they're like rock stars, except nobody ever gets them the cars. So my idea was, I'm going to get them the cars, basically, in theory. So maybe you could touch on how you sort of morphed from an amazing career of being a music manager into this successful film producer, and then re-emerging, I don't say re-emerging, but coming back and with this whole sort of celebrity chef business. Maybe you could just touch on that a little bit.
In '78, I think it was, when I won the Cannes Film Festival, it was for Paramount Pictures. And they took me to a little restaurant in the south of France, in the mountains, called the Moulin des Mougins. And it was the Cannes Film Festival, so in the room was everybody, Anthony Quinn, Pavarotti, Barbra Streisand, Jack Valente. It was like everybody. And a lot of people that didn't seem too comfortable in their skin. A lot of, moving around, smoking, no one looking at their table, everybody looking to see who was coming in. And I was way too successful at that point. I was managing Groucho Marx, Raquel Welch, Blondie, Alice. I was 25 or something. Just won the Cannes Film Festival. I had the hottest restaurant in LA. Women were flying. I was going to the Playboy Mansion. I was putting things I was putting things in every hole I could find. And I knew I was at risk, but I was having a great time. I mean, second by second, I was living the life. But I knew inside me there was a clock ticking. And by this time, Jimmy was gone, Morrison, so many people were gone, and I could see I was either on the path of their path or the path of becoming like a real asshole. And I've always been a bit of a groupie. I'm very attracted to power and fame. So in this room of power and fame, in walked this beautiful man, white hair and a white jacket, very calm. The whole climate in the restaurant changed. James Coburn was there. He jumped up and gave him a big hug, and there's like a line, Anthony Quinn, everybody waiting to hug him. Obviously the power guy in the room. And the chef, because he's in white, I assume. But I was a macaroni and ketchup guy at that point in my life. Give me a big bowl and a Sara Lee cheesecake and a football game, and I'm a happy guy. And but as soon as he came in the room, I said, "That's who I want to be. I don't want to be them. I want to be him. I want to be that guy." So those days I was very abusive of everything. So I had a pretty good buzz going. I just won the Cannes Film Festival, When Paramount was leaving, I said, "I'm going to stay," and I waited till everyone left, and he came. He was sitting with someone, and I went over to him and I said, "I want to be your grasshopper," and he had no idea what I was talking about. Kung Fu, the TV show, Grasshopper Master, and what is this grasshopper? I said, "I just want to be around you," and he said, "I am a simple cook. Do you cook?" And I said, "No." He said, "Well, if you learn to cook, I'll let you work in the kitchen with me for a day." How do I learn to cook? And he gave me the name of some restaurants and of some cooking schools, Marcella Hansen in Bologna, and a couple of other ones. And I went to all the schools and came back the next year. I was very lucky. I think we had a movie in Cannes for 12 or 13 years in a row. Yeah. So I had a reason to go back every year. And I showed up, "I'm here." And he had no idea who I was at all. And I said, "But last year you told me if I went," and I went to the schools, and "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm leaving for Bangkok the day after the festival. Can you come back?" And I said, "Oh, can I go to Bangkok with you?" And he looked at me like I was crazy, but being who he is, he said, "Yes, if you like, of course." So I went to Bangkok with him, and that started my journey as his grasshopper for the next, till he passed away, which was a few years ago. And I really thought of myself in that grasshopper role, so I would take his chair out. I take his coat, put it on the thing, open the napkin. And I travel with him about 5 or 6 weeks a year. Through my association with him, because he was the rock star, we'd go to LA and Nobu would come and Wolfgang would come and all the great chefs would come. So I was like the mascot. And then at one point I started dating a very famous actress, so she would come with me. And now these people are scratching their heads, wait a second, the grasshopper is going out with Sharon Stone? What's going on here? He's the grasshopper. And then they started to know what I did, and things started going. And at one point in my relationship with Mr. Verger, I said, what I do for a living is the back of the house, not the front of the house. I don't want to put on a tuxedo and sit there while you're doing the dinner and then go meet for a drink after. Let me be your road manager. Let me check you into the hotel, go into the kitchen with you, collect the money for you. So I did it, and what it turned out to be is the part that I had never seen, because I was stuck in this groupie glow of not really looking behind the curtain, just so excited to be with my mentor. But when I saw that they'd asked for a credit card when he checked into a hotel that he was doing a show at, doing a dinner at. Wow, that's weird. Like, if they ever asked Luther for a credit card at the MGM Grand,
No.
I remember we were the second show at the MGM Grand. He found out that Barbra Streisand had a bigger suite. He canceled the show. Remember that?
I remember that.
Wouldn't play. Credit card. Okay. So I would give my credit card because I didn't want to embarrass Verger. I thought this was like an anomaly. And then I'd take him to the room, and it was always the smallest, darkest room in the place. I'd go to my room. It'd be gigantic and bright. And then we did the first show, and I said, "Who do I go to get paid?" And he said, "Oh, no, Shep, I do not take money for this." Excuse me? You don't take money for this, you know? There's 300 people who paid $500 a piece. Oh, no, Shep, no, it's okay. And then we finally got to the last show was the Highlands Inn in Northern California. And it was a series they did called the Grand Master Series. And you paid $2,500 to get a hotel room for 2 nights, a cooking lesson, and a lunch and a dinner with Mr. Verger. And the next person in was from Hawaii, Roy Yamaguchi. So we get there, the room is so horrible, it's next to a garbage dump, that I take him to another hotel and tell him the hotel wanted him to be in a better place. I never told him that it was the buyers. Where do we get paid? Oh, no, Shep, we do not get paid. It's $2,500, it's 500 people. It's Mr. Verger. No. But I had always wanted to get him to Hawaii. We're now 15 years into our relationship. And I've always wanted to get him to Hawaii. I can't. A Hawaiian chef is coming the next day. I know if he tastes his food, he will come to Hawaii. So I get him to stay over. And we go to the restaurant for dinner, for Roy Yamaguchi's dinner. And the maitre d' was a very nice guy, pulled me in the corner. He said, "Mr. Gordon, I didn't realize you were bringing Chef Verger." And I said, okay. And he said, so we have a policy here that help can't eat in the dining room, but I'll feed you for free in the bar. And it was like, the help, you didn't pay him. We couldn't use your room. What defines help? That he made you money? And I said to Mr. Verger that night, I got a little buzz, and I said, "Mr. Verger, I love you so much that if you ever do one of these again, I am going to choke you to death because I'm too embarrassed for you." And then from now on, and he'd been asking me for a few years if I would help him. I said, "From now on, you tell everybody to call me. Just call me. Do not do this anymore," because I loved him. And he said, "Chef, that would be so wonderful. It would be so wonderful to see my peers get some respect that they deserve." That was sort of his mission. He was never economically driven. This was a whole different thing. So anyway, I left him that day. I flew to the Big Island where I had Kenny Loggins doing a corporate show for a lot of money. Actually, really funny stories. Just as an offshoot, it's my first. I'm sitting in my office and I get a phone call. Is Kenny Loggins available the next week? Nobody ever books a week in advance. Remember that show? Yeah. And I said, he happens to be off. I said, yeah. And the lady says, well, we have a Nissan or Mazda or somebody convention, and the act just canceled. I think it was Jackson Browne or the Eagles, and we need a replacement. How much would that cost? And Kenny at the time was making $75,000 maybe a night. So I said, well, it'd be $125,000. And the voice at the other end of the phone said, I'm really sorry, we can only pay $300,000. Okay, we'll take that one. And then I hung up the phone. I called someone who explained to me that in the corporate world, they hired people to book talent. The person booking it got 5% of the fee. And the client must have been in the room listening to her. Oh, no, we can only go 300. So anyway, I show up, and there's Wolfgang Puck, who I know from Mr. Verger. And, hey, Wolf, what are you doing here? I'm doing the dinner that Kenny's playing at. And I said, wow, I just came from Mr. Verger. And he said, how is he? I said, well, I just had this horrible experience. And I tell him the story. And he says, listen, Shep, they called me up and offered me 2 first-class tickets to come do this. I thought it'd be a nice vacation. Then they call me up 4 days beforehand. They can't source the products for my meal. Could I bring the product? So now I'm on the plane. I have 150 pounds of food. I get to the airport. There's nobody there. I call up the chef. He says, oh, we're so busy. Put it in a cab. So I take it in a cab. When I get there, he says, I'm so sorry. We have this big convention that you're doing, and we're doing a couple of banquets. We don't have any refrigeration space. But the hotel next door said you could put it in their fridge. And he gives him a rack, and he has to walk it a half a mile to the fridge 2 times because it was too much for one rack, and walked it back this morning. And I said, what are they paying you? He said, paying me? You crazy? None of these guys. And I said, you guys are nuts. So now the show's over, and in corporate world, you have to do a meet and greet. You have to, the important VIPs, the artist has to say hello to after the show. And Kenny Loggins' line is 20 people, and Wolfgang's is 300. And Kenny's getting 300,000. Wolf's getting nothing, coach tickets. And he said, would you help me too? And I said, Wolf, you guys don't make any money. I just, I'll do it for Verger, and hopefully that'll help everybody. But what did you make last year? And he said 75,000. And I said, Luther makes $1 million a night. Like, I work on a commission. I can't. So anyway, I get to LA, and Wolf calls me up 2 days later for lunch. And I go over to Spago, and I'm driving there. I realize they're not open for lunch. And I said, what the hell am I going here for? And I walked in, and it was almost all the great chefs of America. Paul Prudhomme, Alice Waters, Nobu, all of them. It was the first year of an event that Wolf was doing at Universal. So all these chefs had come in, and they had a big banner in the back of Spago that just said, help! So I started a chef's agency that day. Yeah. And
completely turned the business around on its head once again. Well, we could sit here all day, man, and talk stories, and the best story ever. But we are going to be running out of time soon, and we do want to open it up for a couple questions. So
two-handed question.
Two-handed questions always go before one-handed questions.
No. Oh.
Up on Facebook. Could you kindly walk us through how to make a film and where to get the funding versus financing?
I'm so not current that it's a really hard answer. As a spectator, because it's now become a spectator sport for me, I'm really excited by this whole world of crowdfunding. I just think it's really exciting if you can. If you're making movies that have a reason to live, and you can connect with the audience who needs that information beforehand, then it's a beautiful journey because everybody's pulling together. And I've seen a bunch of successful crowdfunding things. They're usually more commercial and obvious. But if I was a young person wanting to do something, I would probably get a hold of some people in universities who are marketing students who really understand how, I just watched this guy who ran the Republican thing. He had districts where there were 13 people that he targeted. So if you're making a Western that is being made purely for entertainment, I don't think it works. But if you have something that you believe in and you want to put a light on or tell a story and inform other people, I think it seems as if there's a way now to reach the people who actually would care. And that would be my, again, spectator advice.
And the second part of that question was, how do I see your film in the future?
I think it's on iTunes and maybe Netflix. And what?
Amazon.
Oh, Amazon?
Yeah,
Great.
Amazon. Question?
Last night you made me cry after I asked you a question about endangered species that are here with our grandchildren and clean energy and how to do what you do and put into that space. And Listen to you today talking about how you took everyone hates and turned that into something. To me, it just seems like everyone loves clean air, clean energy, clean water. I'm just asking, I'm begging you, because it seems to me, for the sake of our grandchildren, we need to be somehow involved in helping figure this out.
Yeah.
The conversation about it.
It's so big. It's just so big. I mean, I spend a lot of time talking with a lot of people about it, and it's just so big. I mean, I don't want to sound fatalist, and I don't mean to be, but it's just, and when I close my eyes and try and do what I normally do, which is get ahead for a while and figure out, okay, how do I get to this goal? I don't get anywhere because I see some major eruption every single path that I can envision. It's a very difficult time. I had, I don't know if I said it at the thing, but I did this George Soros webcast, and it was very poignant to see an 86-year-old man who, very young, dedicated his life to making sure people were treated fairly and that our planet was treated fairly, and watching it all just decay. So, if it was one thing, two things, three things, every day there's another 6, 7 things. It's just layer, and it's decaying so fast. I don't know. I think when I step back far enough, it's depressing. So I try not to step back far enough, because being a student of history, this is the path of democracies. Germany was a democracy when Hitler got in. Italy was a democracy. Philippines were a democracy. If you get far enough away, this is exactly the path to dictatorship, in every single tiny detail, almost like it's been studied. When I only go half the distance, I say to myself, someone needs to take the Democratic Party and slap their faces. Just slap them across the street, to have the nerve to present a candidate to us who I happen to like, but who 60% of the people didn't trust from day one. The nerve to do that, the nerve to run a guy in Atlanta who doesn't live in the district when we're hanging by a thread. We can't affect the 36%, but at least maybe we can affect the other part, and I think it has to start with someone at the top who gives a shit. And obviously the Democrats don't. They only care about themselves. They don't. And I've been a Democrat my whole life, and so I would say if there was an apparatus that we could plug into, that we could all work for. The part to me that's so depressing is I don't see that apparatus, and every time I try and think about forming one, we don't have the time to put it in place. We need an infrastructure or a human that we can all get behind, and that's not appearing anywhere. I haven't seen one person the Democrats even talk about for running for president who it's almost embarrassing. And again, I don't want to be a fatalist, and I hope everybody out there every day does something to try and make it better. I just wish I had a clearer idea of what that is.
All right, we have time for one more question.
So, to that point, you have a connection with Dalai Lama,
Right.
and I'm sure you have a lot of your life is spiritually based. Might the solution be not so much, physical, but more of evolution on a spiritual level?
He lost the bet. He lost the bet.
No, but he always says that.
But he lost the bet. I don't mean him. I mean spirituality. They lost their country. They lost their country, their culture, their life. So it's really hard to go back and say, oh yeah, that's the thing that'll work, being spiritual. They lost their country. We're losing our country.
He always said that gave him the opportunity to bring his message.
Yeah, no, he's beautiful. I mean, he's beautiful. One point he talked about it at our board meeting, and he said, I know that I lost my country for my people. I really know it. But I did the best I could do. And that's all I can do, is the best I can do. And then he brings a positive spin to everything, because beautiful, and he's a Dalai Lama, and he's fantastic. But as an answer to oppression, you know, at certain times maybe. I mean, Martin Luther King's day, there was a respect for civilization that you could silently protest. I would say now, if people, the next big march, there'll be people really hurt. Really hurt. Like it's gone past, they're moving it inch by inch by inch. And there will be something that'll either create it or that'll call for martial law. I mean, it's a very, and that's what I try and get ahead of every time I sit and say, what's the answer? I get to those places, and they have the guns. Yeah. We don't. I don't think we want them, but, you know. So it's a difficult situation. Hey, Michael. Michael Lang here, everybody.
All right, well, that's all the time we really have. Oh, Michael has a question. All right, that's it. That's the last one.
The comment is that it's up to the other 64% to get out and vote.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that if we could find someone to vote for, and I don't know if the Democratic apparatus is going to allow that person ever into it, and I don't know if we have time to set up an independent one. That's what I was referring to. But that's the only answer. It's getting those 64% to actually give a shit and understand that it changes their life. That one. So I'm with you 1,000%. I just have trouble seeing what's going to bring them all together. That's why I say the Democratic Party is the ones who should be slapped around, because they have a chance. They really have, you know, if they had the right person, I think it could change on a dime. But when I saw what happened in Atlanta, that to me was one of the most depressing things ever, because there was a moment to make a statement. And when I heard that he didn't come from the district, what an insult. What an arrogant insult to be, I mean, that, anyway, don't want to dwell on it, but yeah.
Mandatory voting. You don't get a driver's license unless you vote.
That's a great idea.
Yes, because if you don't have...
But how do you get it passed?
Well, that's the problem.
Yeah, no, I get it. But that's a solution. I agree with you.
Then it's
Yeah.
representative
Yeah.
democracy, and we don't have that.
I agree with you 100%. Yeah.
All right, well, listen, that is all the time we have. I want to
gotta-
thank Chef Gordon, by the way.
I gotta do one plug for the meatball shop. I had the greatest meatballs at Sharky's Meatballs. He's a young new business.
Yeah.
And fantastic. So I just
Again,
wanna
thank you, Chef.
go a shout
Thank
out.
you, everybody.